We've allocated around 100 billion, and we are continuing the same trajectory in 2026. $1 billion have been allocated to the energy sector to subsidize the cost of providing the electricity. And that is supported equally by the expansion of the universal access promise of the president to the population. Currently, our energy access is about 75%, and we are on course to clock about 90%. So we are expanding the access as well as supporting the subsidy so that people can have affordable electricity. That's one. Of course, education is one sector where from kindergarten to grade 12 is all free education in public schools, and in the higher education category, which cross-cuts across both the education sector as well as the youth sector, we have provided through the government scholarship more than 50% of the university-going students on funding. And for the first time, we have also included those segments of the youth that may not avail the opportunity of acquiring a scholarship whilst not being able to fund their education through their own resources. We are launching in this budget the education loan scheme. So student loan scheme is a feature of the budget, and allocations have been set against that. Then you come to the agricultural sector. We continue to provide subsidies to this sector, and it's a prominent feature of this budget. We'll subsidize the fertilizer. More than $900 million have been put aside as a subsidy for the agricultural sector in the form of fertilizer as input subsidy, as well as the crop financing, that is subsidy of the groundnut purchase. As you know, a bag of fertilizer is being subsidized by more than 50%, and a ton of groundnut is also subsidized by more than 50%, because the price that we are paying is 38, when the price is slightly about 45%.
Even though farmers are still asking for more.
Of course, not is enough. we wish. More, yeah. So, I mean, we wish we had the fiscal space. That's where the fiscal responsibility come in, to contain the deficit at 1%. But we are expecting to sell the proceeds at about $20,000 per metric ton. So you have a subsidy of about $18,000 per metric ton. These are all interventions that are there to improve the life and livelihood. Not to talk about the investment in the roads. That is a continuing feature of our budget in the recent years.
You mentioned that the 2026 budget, yes, records the lowest deficit in 10 years.
Yes.
What specific measures help achieve this?
Well, the key priorities are expenditure containment, despite the fiscal pressure and despite the obvious need to continue to invest. But you can only invest when there are resources that you make, because if you want to spend beyond what you are actually generating as revenue, the only way is to borrow. And we are trying to reduce our borrowing, and we have started paying the principal component of our debt. Also, the top line, revenue is projected to grow by 13%, which is quite a decent number. So we believe with the upside of the 13% increase in the revenue growth and containment of the expenditure to a certain level, that has helped us realize the 1% deficit.
Also, critics argue that the allocations in the 2026 budget is unrealistic, as they would put it, and some in fact say it is politically motivated, knowing the fact that 2026 is an election year. How do you respond to some of these arguments?
I think if those who have been very familiar with budgeting as a process, if it was a political budget, as they have assumed, the deficit will be in the 3 to 5%. Because if you increase the deficit, that will enhance the scope of your additional funding that you can avail with. This is a very responsible budget in a political year of election year. So I think the numbers are speaking the other way around, because if you look at a responsible budget or politically motivated budget, That means the government is on a spending spree, spending splurge to spend on huge mega projects that will be funded through borrowing massively in the election year, which is not the case here. We have a budget that is very fiscally responsible. And for us to record the lowest deficit in an election year is pointing to the reverse of what people are saying. Because that comment will be valid if the deficit has increased tremendously, and as such government takes the opportunity to borrow and spend in an election year. We have spending pressures coming from conducting the elections next year, but notwithstanding, compromises have been made, or the expenditure rationalization to ensure that the spending envelope is not exaggerated.
Anytime when you talk about budget formulation and budget speech, people mostly focus on the issue of the debt servicing obligations. I mean, that we have seen climbed in this budget to over $13 billion. That is nearly 1/3 of the total expenditure. I mean, how can a budget be people-centered under this burden?
Well, you see, we have a debt level that is elevated. Our debt to GDP is in the 70%. So as such, what has given rise to this is a number of factors. With the onslaught of COVID, there was a deferral in terms of servicing the principal element of the debt stock that we have. And as a result, you have 3 or 4 years of principals that you were not servicing. You were only servicing the interest related to those debts, particularly external debts. So when those, they call it debt service suspension initiative, when that expired in 2024 to 2025 and maturities for 2026 are what comprises the increased expenditure. This is a result of that holiday that was granted in servicing the debt, but also the exchange rate effect of the debt stock, particularly which were denominated in foreign currency. In the interest of time, we had looked at the debt as an issue. Do we want to just make we are going to have a workshop or a press conference to break down to granular details the composition of the debt and the evolution of the debt. Because I do hear that people are saying, oh, that this government has borrowed more
than Jammeh and Jawara combined.
Which I cannot explain enough how the debt has evolved. You see, this government has indeed borrowed, but those borrowings are going into tangible investment that people can see.
Any idea how much this government has borrowed so far?
Of course, the debt stock is about $125 billion is now, as of 2024 ending.
How much of this is on the borrow?
Well, it's not easy to say how much of it is on the borrow, because you have to look at how it evolved over time. In 2017, there were a lot of debts in the system as a legacy. You know very well, with the coming into being of this new dispensation, there were debts that were between Social Security and government, debts between commercial banks and government, which were not recorded. So this government, that was one component. Then you also have obligations of NAWEC to the banking system, and you also have some confirmed debts from contractor like Karafi that were there, about $50 million, which were not new debts, but just because there were debts hanging in the system, this government, in fiscal consolidation, combined this to absorb them in order to build confidence in the financial system. So there was a 30-year bond that was issued to accommodate those debts that were spiraling in the system. And there was another debt about almost, the numbers will come out in due course. I don't have it off my head. You have the 7-year NAWEC bond that was also issued, as well as debt related to the confirmed debt of the contractor. So when you add this, they come to a significant amount. That's one stock. That stock of debt is not any new debt that this government has taken, because it has not realized, it has not been manifested in the form of new funds coming to the government, but those are legacy debt in the system that the government has inherited.
It's a continuity.
Yes, government is continuity. Yeah. So that's one aspect. So even though it's recorded in the face of this regime, but the debts were there before, just that they were not recognized. And people also forget that in the previous regime of Jammeh, there was a debt forgiveness under HIPIC, highly indebted poor country initiatives, that literally reduced the debt stock by about 20% in present value terms as at that time. So if you add all of this, you can see already the numbers don't look as linear as it appears. It's not a matter of subtracting 46 billion from 125 billion and assume that, oh, we've borrowed twice. You get my point? Mm-hmm. Because part of that additional borrowing were borrowings or obligations that were there, but they have not been reflected in our system. So that is one. And then the debt forgiveness that the previous government benefited from, which is not the case now. So we have 4 elements, okay? In 2017, the exchange rate of the dollar to the dollar was hovering around 50, 52 or thereabout.
Now it's 72.
Now you're talking about
72.
The exchange rate component of the foreign currency portion of the loan. That's another element that has added to the domestic aggregate of the debt stock. So all of these are numbers that we will disaggregate, and the issue will be, where has the new borrowings gone to? We have witnessed unprecedented investment in the fiscal infrastructure that were funded through debt. One example is the Batin-Hardin Highway. One example, Batin-Hardin Highway is constructed at more than $150 million. Then you have the University of the Gambia, both phase 1 and phase 2, even though the project started earlier in the previous regime, but actual construction started under President Barrow. So you can see that the regime of President Jammeh started the University of the Gambia project, but the construction and the disbursement as such, the loans associated with that construction happened under the watch of His Excellency President Barrow.
So what do you think should be done?
No, I'm coming. Okay. I'm trying to explain where the new borrowings have gone to. Okay. You come to the electricity sector. What was the access to electricity prior to coming into being of President Barrow? Less than 50%. Today we are talking about more than 75%. Then you look at the healthcare. Look at how the healthcare has expanded. Look at the investment in education, the investment in agriculture. Some of these transactions are all funded through debt. So this is what these new additional borrowings have gone into. And it's time that we have done this, because failure to do so will only prolong our development. If you don't invest aggressively to build a fiscal infrastructure in the form of roads, energy, and telecom or IT infrastructure, you are sliding back. So this is where the additional borrowings have gone into. It's not a situation whereby whatever was borrowed is something that disappeared in thin air. Today, traffic time for commuters using the Batin-Hardin Highway has been reduced by more than half, at least for my own. I know my travel time has been reduced by more than half. So every day, the economic gains accruing to individual citizens from this new transaction, which these borrowed funds have funded, situation of money disappearing in thin air.
So my question will be, you're talking about most of these things are legacy loans, and because of
I think, I'm not saying all of them are legacy. I'm saying there were about 4 elements that were legacy. With the 30-year bond, the confirmed contractor, the NAWEC bond, those are 3, as well as the debt forgiveness. Because for you to have a starting point of a lower number, which was the result of a debt forgiveness, it's not comparing like for like. You get my point. So for you to compare like for like, you would have said, okay, there was a debt forgiveness of this. So in this period, there is no debt forgiveness. So in order to balance it out, you should know what has happened in that time compared to now.
Yeah, so what I was saying, I mean,
yes.
So what measures do you think, I mean, or what measures is your ministry taking to ensure you are able to stabilize the exchange rate, which is in turn really, you know, affecting our loans in terms of the figures?
On the exchange rate, that is the monetary policy, which is the domain of the central bank. But on our side as the fiscal, what we try to do is to minimize the deficit. Because if the deficit is large, you have to finance the deficit, and that may put pressure on your exchange rate. If you know, so
correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, with 7.6 billion projected to be borrowed domestically, correct me if I'm wrong with this figure. Are we not in any way crowding our private sector credit and perhaps, you know, driving up interest rates?
No, actually, no. There is, if you look at the liquidity in the banking sector, today the debt loans to deposit ratio on the commercial banks are less than 40%. That means the commercial banks are sitting on tons of money out there that is supposed to be available for lending. So we are very mindful of the nature of the banking industry in terms of our debt issuances. Of course, 7 billion in an economy of the size of the Gambia, particularly in Dalasi, might not, all of this is not issued at once. There's an issuance calendar for the year. And that takes into account the liquidity of the market, the maturity profile, the investor appetite before any issuance is done.
So what concrete steps are being taken to not just reduce, I mean, or reduce the debt burden, but help stabilize?
Well, we are working on multiple fronts. Okay. First is to ensure that we only borrow when required. That's number one. We are not borrowing simply because funds are there for asking. We are only borrowing to invest in sectors that will drive growth and drive the economy or improve the life and livelihood of Gambians. That's one. Two, we are not borrowing commercial debts in the international market. Oh. We are only borrowing concessional funding.
Why?
Because concessional funding means for every loan we contract, the grant element must be at least 35%. So that means if you borrow $100, 35% of it should be grant.
At least $35
should be grant, and only 65% will see your effective servicing of the debt. That's three. And we are growing our revenue base to build internal resilience. Because don't forget, unless we look inward, that's why we have a whole new strategy at the ministry focusing on domestic resource mobilization strategy. So that you grow your revenue base, you grow the size of your economy. As such, you will have more returns or more income to be able to continue to service. And what is happening is these investments have a lagging effect. Today, as you can see, even Baton Harding is going to a third phase. Even with the second phase of Baton Harding, we have seen the economic takeoff in terms of improve in the lives of the vehicles that are flying, reduction of travel time, and not only that, the associated economic commercial activity along the corridor. We are all tracking the road. You can see the type of real estate that is coming up along the Baton Harding. So that is one very important thing we try to do to make sure that once this investment mature, the returns that will accrue to the entire ecosystem of the economy will far outweigh the cost. We'll have initial teething troubles of servicing, but the way our debt strategy is planned, the debt to GDP was as high as 120 when this government came into being. It has gone down, and it was about 85%. Today we are talking about the 70s. So that means the curve of the debt to GDP, which is a level of measurement of debt burden, is going down.
Is it sustainable?
It's high. Actually, our debt level has been classified as high but sustainable. Every year, as part of the IMF program that we are in, we run what they call debt sustainability assessment. The fund will work with us and they will run a model to check, to test our debt levels, whether based on the current debt profile and the expected pipeline, because there's a debt program that we have, that it will indeed be serviceable as the economy can withstand it. We are growing at about 6% in 5.9% in 2025. We are on course to grow about 5.6 in 2026. That's a decent growth. We are growing above the sub-Saharan African average. And what we expect, the result of all of this is a bigger economy with more fiscal space, more revenue potential to service and grow the size of the economy.
In the budget, we have seen education tax the largest share.
Yes.
That's about $5.9 billion.
Yes.
Why prioritize education over other productive sectors like agriculture? Or
It's a deliberate policy of the government. And I can safely say, under His Excellency's leadership, you have to invest in human capital. This largest investment and the best investment you can make as a government is to invest in your people. And there is no better investment than investing in education. I've said this and I will repeat it. If you invest in the human capital formation, you are building the economic and resilient capability of your country for posterity. As they say in the layman language, before you give me fish every day, teach me how to fish. And that investing education does. And we are not doing it at, in fact, investment in education is not just what is allocated to basic and secondary education ministry, but even higher education. If you look at how much we have spent on the University of the Gambia and Farabakam, but if you go to the university, you have a feel of it.
But yeah, I have read
Yes.
a story where
Yes.
the NAMPO Chancellor, Alma Mejeba, is saying much should have been given to the higher education ministry.
No, I'm coming. Oh, yeah, that's a different discussion we'll have.
Yeah.
You see, the role of government is to invest in the basic and secondary education. Because as they say, we're a developing country, yes, but benefits of higher education accrues more to the individual than to the system. But when you invest in the early formative life of a human being, that's where the wherewithal is not there. In higher education, we are talking about loan facility. No child can go and acquire a loan to invest in their education. But higher education has, in fact, this is not unique to Gambia. Globally, higher education is funded through loans and grants or form of scholarships. Educational investment globally emphasizes primary and secondary education. And that's what we are doing. But we as a government are not, it's not only what we are allocating to the ministry in the form of scholarship and running cost, but how much have we invested in building infrastructure associated with higher education. University of the Gambia at Faraba Bantan campus is a world-class university. Yeah. I think it's a university campus I'm so proud of. Yeah. I've traveled within the sub-region, and I'm very proud as a Gambian to have such a university campus. Then you go to the USET, which is for the technical and vocational skills. USET TVET centers are springing everywhere. CRR North, CRR South, Tanje, Ndemban, Kanila, everywhere. And the one at Brikama, you see the structure. So these are all investment in education, in basic, in tertiary, as well as tertiary is academic, that's the university. And of course, you have the skills aspect of it, that's the TVET. And these are not only the three campuses or the three segments. You have several universities, like GTTI is also converted to a university, MDI is converted to a university. All of these are publicly funded. So
let's now look at
this deliberate policy of investing in human capital is an anchor of our national development plan. It's a key political promise of the president to make sure that every Gambian is given the wherewithal, the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise to be able to live a decent life.
I have seen, the health sector receives about $3 billion.
Yes.
Agriculture's allocation, has increased by 84%. That's like $1.75 billion. What reforms or improvements should the public expect with this investment in this sector?
Well, this again, as I am telling you, these are deliberate investments to change the narrative, because we are looking at agriculture differently by an increment of 84% compared to the previous year. And total allocation to the sector is about 1.7 billion. That is the largest allocation from government funds. That's the GLF component. But even with that, if you look at what the sector is benefiting with the support of the donors, the agricultural sector is actually benefiting quite substantially. It's about 7 billion. If you add the 1.7 plus what the donors are doing. So this is on the backdrop of Gambia being a primarily agricultural economy, and the investment is reflecting government priorities. The farming community is an important segment of the population. That's why we are subsidizing both the input in terms of fertilizer, both the crop financing in terms of the groundnut output, as well as even we support in the form of seed input. High yield seeds are being granted to the farmers as gratis. Also, some tractors are also subsidized and supporting the farming community. So this is another shift in this year's budget.
Many are asking, Honorable Minister, for you to justify why allocating 52.5 million to the President's Meet the People tour in what many describe as a year of fiscal strain. The other thing also is that the Office of the President receives over $700 million, and people are asking why such a high allocation when actually other key sectors are saying they need more.
Well, I think we cannot explain enough about the allocation to the Office of the President. This is the executive of the country, and don't forget, the Office of the President is like a ministry, it's a head. Under that, you have different entities that are large, like the State Intelligence Services is under the Office of the President. You have the Population Secretary, it's under the Office of the President. You have the National Disaster, it's under the Office of the President. You have the State Guard, that is the security aspect, are also under the Office of the President.
Is it the same budget as the Office of the Vice President?
No, the Office of the Vice President has also got subvented entities.
Okay.
But the President...
Is it disaster under the Office of the Vice President?
I think disaster is under...
NANA and...
No, you have, because they were all together before.
Yeah.
Now, NANA, Population Secretariat,
Social
Protection are under the Office of the Vice President. But still you have residual subvented entities that sit under the Office of the President. And a large part of it is definitely the security outfit, which I have mentioned. And coming back to the Meet the People tour, this is a constitutional requirement. And I think this is value for money, because this is not just a tour to go and meet people. The President uses this to do site visit of projects to see where these monies are going. If you go on the Meet the People tour, no tour is complete without several site visits of projects that are ongoing that the President can see for himself and assess. We have just told you how much we are investing in the infrastructure, in the energy, in the water sector. So how do you think it will be for the President only to be informed by the form of reports or people going to site visit? There's nothing like visually identifying with the projects themselves. So the Meet the People tour is a constitutional provision, and the Constitution specifically stipulates at least twice a year. Over the recent years, the President has only gone once. So that explains everything.
So what measurable outcomes justify that these allocations are not beyond, political visibility for the President, especially during the tour?
Well, I don't know how the President was elected through a political process. Yeah. So how can you divorce his activity from that? Anywhere in the world, wherever the President goes, he's not on a political campaign per se, but there will be his well-wishers. There will be people who will sympathize, who will be supporters of his political thought process, his political party. And The president cannot tell them, because I'm going to meet the people, to don't come and show your loyalty or manifest your support to my party or to my government. So I hope that is clear. I am not able to have that magic wand to be able to split the activity of a president between his executive function per se and a political role. Because don't forget, he's a political president. He's, by virtue of that office, is political. So I really want to be guided by people who say it should not be political. How? I mean, I'm not saying it's a political trip, but how would you divorce or extract the political component of the activities of the president? You get my point? Yeah. Imagine you are a president. Would it be possible for you to say, oh no, I'm going on a Meet the People tour, which is a constitutionally sanctioned. I'm going to Jara. So yes, your home base, and people come and visit you and sympathize with you and support your party in their colors, their party T-shirts. You should tell them, no, because this is a different visit. It's not a political visit, so don't come. You get my point. I'm lost in this area. Exactly. And I don't think I can safely say that, of course, there are politics to everything that we are doing as a government, but to be rest assured, these are not funds that are wasted.
Personal emoluments have been rising rather than the economy.
It's deliberate. It's deliberate. The president has always believed in compensating the public servants of the country adequately within the resource envelope available. It is only under his dispensation you have, in 3 years, a pay rise of more than 60%. In 2022, 30%. In 2025, another 30 overall, but some individual grades actually had more than even 70% because it was cascaded according to grades. And don't forget, there was an earlier 50% increase. So you are talking about, under his watch, in these two regimes, and these two tenors, 2 terms, the president has increased the compensation, the remuneration of the public servants by more than 110%, which is unprecedented. We don't have natural resources. It is through the domestic resource mobilization, innovative financing, and the fiscal prudence that the president is actually using to be able to do this. Because look, we can just, I think the easiest way to look at what we are doing as a government is to look within the sub-region. Because this information are in public domain. How many governments have done such within the sub-region? And look at our resource disposition. We don't have any natural resource where we'll be selling oil or gold or uranium. All we have is the human resource and the service we provide and the tax-based economy. So I think the fact that the president is mindful of the well-being of citizens is one cornerstone that the wage bill continue to feature prominently. And I can assure you, going forward, the president will always ensure that the compensation of the public servants are at the forefront of his agenda.
You keep emphasizing the importance of, boosting domestic revenue, which is spearheaded by the Gambia Revenue Authority.
Yes.
I mean, will there be any new taxes or tax increment in the 2026 budget?
Well, all these gains that the GRA have attained in the past and are still doing very well are not on the backdrop of increased taxation. As you know, in the last 3 years, fiscally, we have not increased any corporation tax, VAT, or income tax. All these tax rates have remained the same.
So how are they able to?
Yeah, I'm coming. So that's, I'm on record to say that in the last 3 years, there has been no increase in the VAT rate, corporation tax rate, or personal income tax rate. Instead, in 2025, if you look at the threshold of the personal income tax, before 2025, the first 24,000 were tax-free. After 24,000, you come into the first bracket for the income tax. In 2025, we've increased that bracket to 36. So technically giving every citizen 12,000 income tax free additional income without taxation. So that means at a basic rate of 25%, that means 3,000 additional income, which could have gone in the form of tax, but it's not been taxed, is now in the pockets of the public servants or the employees of the country, because income tax schedule applies to both public and private. So this is what it is. The budget for next year is still along the same line. No increases in these three broad tax categories. But of course, we will continue to do certain tax increases in what we call sin tax areas.
What are these areas?
These are like gambling, like we want to discourage that behavior. It's not something you can tell people to stop, but you can use fiscal measures to nudge people to move away from it. Cigarette will also go up, as well as certain wines and spirits, which are not good health products to consume. This will feature to be the tax levels on those will increase. But this is purely not for financial or income reasons, but simply this is where you use fiscal tools to nudge or encourage society to move away from activities that seem not as improving the well-being of people.
Like you mentioned, I mean,
yes.
For the past 3 years, I mean, there hasn't been any tax increment. Rather, is the GRA trying to use digitalization and trying to maximize other revenue avenues to be able to meet the target. I think the target this year is 25 billion?
No, this year was about 23 and they
billion.
have already met it as we speak.
Okay.
So the December collection will be an overperformance.
And that's commendable, right?
Yes, they've done very well. It's one of the best performing agencies in terms of its performance track record, because of the reforms and these reforms at the forefront have been spearheaded by the president. I keep harping this because all these fiscal tools and strategies will only work so long as you have that executive sponsorship. Even if you have the best ideas, you have the best tools, if you don't have that political will and support at the leadership, it won't work.
And a strong leadership at the institutional level as well.
Exactly. Then even at the institutional is micro.
Yeah.
It has to be at the highest level of sponsorship, that is from the presidency. With that, then it's cascade down.
To the ministry,
to the ministry and then to the agencies. So we're blessed to have a president that is very physically savvy. And as such, these reforms are really dear to him. He actually pushes for some of them. In fact, in a number of them, he'll give us the signal to say, go ahead. And implementing them are not without challenges. Most of these reforms, to implement them, have met with the stiffest of resistance. And we could have buckled under the pressure, but he stood firm and said, continue the reform agenda, proceed.
What's the target for GRA next year?
27 billion.
27?
We know they can do it because we have the policy, we have the technology, we did our numbers, we did our calculation. I will be very, we are comfortable that they can perform.
I know CG must be smiling by now if he's watching this.
No, I think the entire team at GRA has done a phenomenal job. And I think the entire country needs to give them an applaud for this, because these reforms were not easy. These reforms are people, human beings don't like change, but the whole team has been galvanized to embrace the change and the resultant outlook. And it is from here that our fiscal sustainability, if you look at it, we would have had no fiscal pressure if it was not the ambitious nature of the president. If, suppose, let's reverse the roles. If the president says, okay, I found the wage bill at that level, I'll keep it as it was done before. Just 110% out of 10 billion. That means the wage bill would have been 5 billion. Our deficit is only 2 billion. So even if you back out, suppose you extract the wage increase, we are fiscally in surplus. I hope you get my point.
Yes, I'm getting a point.
And not to talk of the change in our development landscape. The president has now tasked us to use our domestic resources to invest in our investment, in our infrastructure. Like The Hakalan Road was fully funded by government resources. The Kiang West, fully funded by government resources. The Kabada is equally so. So, and these are unimaginable. Why? They were not done over the years simply because of the financial outlay required. It was not that people didn't have the wish or the will to do it. It's just that the fiscal resources were not there. But now with all these reforms and with additional revenue improvements, that's how we are able to do all of these domestic
and now with all this revenue coming in collected domestically, I mean, they are still appealing for increase in government subvention, the Gambia Revenue Authority.
Well, yes, the subvention is something that we have a conversation with. We are aware of their needs and have conversation with the CE on this. We just need to make sure that there's equilibrium. We make sure that they are rewarded equally well for their performance, but not disproportionately in line with the norms. As you know, no institution or a country operates in a vacuum. If you look at any revenue authority, you have a compensation formula. That's best practice. Your compensation is a percentage of the revenue collected. You know, in sub-Saharan African average, the compensation formula for the revenue authorities hovers around 3% of what's collected. And GRA is slightly above that. So we are aware that because of their outperformance, their compensation is above the regional norms. But notwithstanding, we hear and their consideration is taken on board.
Well, I hope it's considered because an institution that's
billions
every year. I mean,
we'll make sure.
Exactly.
In fact, if you look at the Ministry of Finance budget, out of the 2 billion, about 870 million is going to GRA as their subvention. And it's a slight increase from that of last year. So that's where we are.
So Honorable Minister, I mean, with non-tax revenue projected to fall from 7.96 billion to 5.1 billion dollars, why are parastatals failing to generate income?
Well, in fact, this is an elephant in the room as far as our state-owned enterprises are concerned. Because if you look at the total asset base of the state-owned enterprises, they are about $39 billion. And if you are a typical investor, nobody will invest that amount of money without expecting dividend. So, but it so happened legacy has been there. Of course, institutional collapse happened in the past. So what we are trying to do is to build institutions. So we have the State-Owned Enterprise Commission, SOE, State-Owned Enterprises Commission has been set up. And they have set to work. They have been working since 2024 to date, 2023 to date. They are about 2 years, getting to 3. And we are very pleased with the results that they have realized so far. Since coming to being, they have reduced the combined losses of parastatals by half. And the biggest parastatal here is the energy sector, that's NAWEC. And NAWEC has so many legacies that we are still subsidizing. They are not out of the woods, but their financial performance has increased substantially of late. And we believe at that rate of reform implementation, now they are, all the MDs for key parastatals are on the performance contract. They have a periodic review of their performances. They have a, you know, at the end is a scorecard. The commission will rate you and the senior management. I'm sure you are aware of a time when NAWEC senior management wage bill was slashed by 10%, you know, and
in fact, inside the commission it was 15%.
Exactly,
and
but you know,
had to plead for them.
you know, but that really has a positive signaling effect, and we've seen most of the parastatals have now. With
71% of development, funded by donor grants, what happens in the event that these donor priorities tend to shift?
Well, we are not dealing with donors that will change hearts in midstream. We're dealing mainly with international institutional donors. Of course, bilateral donors are there, but most of the projects are funded by international development agencies whose policies don't change overnight. These are predictable sources of financing. That's why we include them in the budget. Okay. If we do not have any visibility, they will not make it to the budget. We are aware of donor fatigue. That's why the best way to build our resilience is to grow the domestic resource mobilization. If you observe, in 2022, total revenue collected by GRA was only 11.6 billion. In 2025, 3 years down the line, they are on course to collect 25 billion. That's an increase of more than 115%. So if in 3 years, of course, we know this growth will taper off at some point, but if in 3 years they have 115% growth, that's a huge achievement. And imagine we are not asking other sectors, because GRA is not the only sector of the economy. Some of the parastatals, even if they are able to suppose grow at a third of the growth rate of GRA, that would have given government additional revenue. So imagine you have 39 billion, you just have 10% dividend return. May sound high, that is like easily 3.9 billion. That's almost equivalent to what we are getting in grants. Budget support, yeah. Because you have 39 billion total assets. If you are able to get a return of about 10% may be on the high side, but even if you say 5% of the asset size, that is like almost 2 billion.
Time is on our side, Honorable. So how will you ensure that, these allocated funds, actually reach the intended projects and to avoid any sort of leakage or
well, we are improving the transparency, reporting. As you know, government reporting has been lagging over the years. Now we've completed all the backlogs. We, as we speak, have just finalized the 2024 annual accounts of government, and the audit is at advanced stages. We hope and look forward to submitting it in time before the end of the year. So that will be one aspect, that you'll not have a huge backlog. Reporting will be more up to date, and any issue relating to the expenditures will come to light quickly. Also, digitalization is on track. We are trying to use innovative compliance methodology to ensure that, for example, in the education sector, we make sure that textbooks are now printed by the Gambia Printing Press and given to the students directly. Increasingly, more and more, those are the type of innovations that we will introduce. And we want to make sure, as we have done reforms in the revenue side, in the next few years, our priority will be to do similar reform on the expenditure side to ensure value for money. It doesn't mean it's not happening, but we'll enhance it. We'll do more on the expenditure side.
And finally, Honorable Minister, what's your message to Gambians who perhaps feel the budget does not reflect their daily struggle, finally?
No, I first of all will dispute that fact. I don't see any Gambian left out, because even if you look at the subsidy of the energy sector, with 75% access to electricity, literally everybody who has electricity is covered.
Cost of living?
No, I'm just explaining.
Exactly.
If you look at petroleum, we still have a very sensitive pricing of our petroleum product. That's why petrol in Gambia is cheaper in the sub-region. If you look at a bag of rice, there's still no duty on it. So
it's still expensive for many.
No, actually, the price of bag of rice has come down.
To what price are they?
Jar Oil and Saro are selling it around. Jar Oil, for sure, I know, are selling a 50 kilo bag at 1,650.
Really? Where are they selling this?
Ali, are you in the country?
Yeah, I want to know. Maybe even someone watching.
Maybe I should check your pocket.
Or maybe someone watching from Sujara.
I don't just sit in the office.
Exactly.
I interact in the market. Okay. And I know what's going on.
Interesting.
Wholesale is 1,650 a bag. Retail 1,700. So
maybe tomorrow I need to go and visit
one of their stores. I now know why you are here. I'm in the market. I'm ahead of you in that regard.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Well, viewers, with that we bring an end to this week's edition of your weekly State of Affairs. My guest was the Gambia's Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs, Sidi Keita, who will be presenting or delivering the 2026 budget speech on Friday at the National Assembly. Honorable, once again, thank you so much for
thank
coming
you very
on the
much
program.
for having us.
I quite appreciate your
we
time.
Thank the audience for the time they take to listen to us, and we assure them that the government is a people government, and the president is working hard to deliver his promises to all the citizens.
Thank you so much. Well, viewers, join us next week. Until then, bye-bye from me, Aliou Cissé, and the entire production team.
Thank you.